how do we raise our consciousness by using projection? My name is Lilia from Engtelligent, and I bet you have heard so many times you're projecting. But in this video, I want to encourage you to start thinking about projection as a valuable tool to help yourself grow. We're going to talk about self-transformation, and on average, a human being walking the earth today feels extremely fragmented and extremely disintegrated. We feel not complete. We don't feel whole as human beings. And projection is a mechanism by means of which we try to compensate for the feeling of unworthiness and for the feeling of incapability that is inherent in being a separate self. So today we're going to talk about projection a little bit, and I'm going to share with you a couple of my personal examples that have to do with projection. I've been gathering them for a couple of days, and I really hope that you enjoy hearing me talk about them, and I really hope, and there is a high chance for you to do so, that you will find examples of projection in your own life. So projection is a mechanism by means of which we project the qualities, traits and behaviours that we consider unacceptable or bad or negative outwards. So we project a whole range of different qualities onto the outer world. So I've come up with a list of very common projections that I may personally succumb to, or that I used to succumb to, that I caught myself succumbing to. When I was a teenager, I used to be a bigger kind of girl. I used to have a bigger body, and I spent a lot of time losing weight. I actually lost 40 kilos. I think I used to be about 85 kilos. And I lost those 40 kilos, and that was a very lengthy process, and maybe we'll talk about it in a different video in case you're interested, so please let me know. But the reason I'm mentioning it here is because after I had lost my weight, I would keep judging people who were large, who had large bodies. And I would often consider those people as having no will, being hideous. I would put all kinds of labels on those people. And that was an example of projection. I'm mentioning it here because obviously I sensed that I had a lack of will, and I felt like I was hideous, but I did not feel that I could actually acknowledge that about myself. So I would project those qualities outwards and hate people for that, instead of working on my own self and those qualities being part of my self mechanism. Another example would have to be condescending behavior. For a very long time, I struggled with people who would behave in a condescending way. I would pinpoint instances of condescending behavior all around me. I just have this wonderful friend who is very intelligent, who is very kind. Her heart is able to embrace the humankind. But every time I met her, I would project superiority and condescending behavior onto her. It took me quite a bit of time to recognize that I was actually bearing the judgment for condescending behavior that I could observe in myself, and I was projecting that onto my friend. Had I noticed that earlier, I would have started the process of integrating that triggering condescending behavior that I observed in my friend within myself, and I would have grown much faster. And that's the reason why I'm shooting this video, because I want to help you recognize the value in projection that happens in your field of awareness, so that you can become more aware of it and that you can reduce suffering to a large extent. Projection generally happens when we suppress some qualities, or when we suppress some feelings in ourselves, some sensations in ourselves that we don't want to recognize, that don't serve our self-agenda. And we see them in another person, and we judge that other person for that, being unable to recognize and acknowledge that in ourselves. I'm living in Ukraine, in Kiev, and some of you guys who have been to a post-Soviet country, or I know that many of you are living in post-Soviet countries, in Russia, in Ukraine, I'm very sure you will have seen this. Usually we have kind of tall blocks of flats. Most people live in flats, in tower blocks here, and very often just next to an entrance in a tower block there will be a bench, and on that bench will be sitting 2 or 3 older women, and every time someone passes by, like a girl living in that entrance passing by and walking into the door of the entrance, those older ladies will say, "Oh, she's a prostitute." Or if a young man kind of walks past having this mainstream, kind of hairstyle, Viking kind of hairstyle, many of those women will say, "Oh, that man, he's just he's a drug addict. He's a drug addicted clubber. He's an alcoholic," or something like that. And that is another example of projection. That is like a type of suppressed sexuality being brought to the surface by those women and projected onto the people who they observe in the outer world. So I thought that would be interesting to notice. The reason I have found projection to be very useful is that I think that once we admit to our own projections, once we find and admit to the hidden and suppressed and denied feelings that we have rejected in ourselves, we will take a step closer towards personal integrity, and we will feel much better about ourselves. It's not going to lead you towards enlightenment or anything like that, because that's a different domain of work, but it will create a more enjoyable sense of being a self, being a person. So here's what we're going to do once we notice that we're projecting. First and foremost, we're going to notice what triggers us. A very easy way to notice where you project is just to look into areas of life, people, maybe certain YouTube bloggers. They tend to be an easy target these days if they're very explicit in their views sharing, or maybe behaviors that you judge as bad or as triggering and as annoying. Those are very likely to be the areas of projection for you. Just notice these and write them down. When we take things out of our minds and we actually put them down on paper, that helps us quite a bit, because we obtain this objective view of whatever we have written. And that's really enjoyable to do. It's way more effective. So the second thing that we're going to do is we're going to determine what feeling is being triggered in us when we observe that kind of triggering or annoying behavior. If I were a Soviet woman sitting on that bench just next to a tower block or a block of flats, I would probably write down that I could have been very moralistic in my youth, and maybe I grew up in a society where sharing my sexuality with other people was unacceptable. I was educated out of that, and probably that would be my sexuality would be the aspect of my life that was severely repressed. So I would define that. After doing that, I would notice where my sexuality lives in my body. Where do I experience my sexuality? I might close my eyes and imagine that I have to draw this sexuality as a cluster of sensations on a sheet of paper, just where it is localized in my body. I would try to feel into my body. If you're familiar with mindfulness practice, that's going to help you quite a bit. I would feel into my body and try to find that cluster of feelings. You might Google emotions body map, and that will show you a wonderful visual demonstration of various emotions and feeling states that you can refer to if you're unfamiliar with emotional vocabulary. So that's what you're going to do. Find the emotion in the body. The next thing that you're going to do may sound a bit advanced, but don't be put off by that. Rather, if you're unfamiliar with this stuff, take it as room for improvement. You're going to stand knowingly as a presence of awareness. You're basically going to flow back into the feeling of I-ness, into the feeling of presence, into what you are. If you're familiar with non-duality and you have discovered your true nature already, that's the place where you need to go. If it feels difficult to you right now, focus on the sense of being you, or you, which is the permanent element in your experience. Try to find that sense of you that observed that little summer house where you played around when you were a 5-year-old kid, and the very same thing, the very same experience, and the very same eye that observes the room where you're sitting right now. Go to that sensation, go to that, it's probably going to be a sensation, but go to that space and take a stand knowingly as that space. From this space, integration is going to start. Having done that, recognize and welcome the feeling sensation that you have previously found in your body into this vast space of present awareness. We awareness. We are infinite. We have no form. We have no preference for one feeling over another. And that's actually what the definition of happiness is. It's the actual willingness to experience anything. And that which experiences anything has no preference for irritation over suppressed sexuality, over overt and explicit sexuality. This space of awareness that we truly are at our core is the space which upholds and includes everything. So you are already that. And the step that you need to take towards healing is to recognize that the feeling that you have rejected and that you're therefore projecting outwards is already inherent in you. It's already in you. We suffer when we resist. We suffer when we don't want to admit to having that feeling. And that's exactly the thing that I'm asking you to do today. Consciousness already contains everything. And when we start knowingly containing all our feeling states, everything that was rejected and suppressed and denied and disowned when we were younger, for whatever reasons we suppressed or denied or rejected that. I'm not judging you for that. You had a good reason to do that because it guaranteed survival in the particular environment where you found yourself in. But right now, recognize that those very feeling states or character traits or behaviors that you rejected, that you dissociated from your sense of self, they had not gone anywhere. They're still there. They're still accommodated by the whirlpool of your consciousness that manifests as your body, that manifests as you, as all of us. You're going to visualize that as this space, you're including that feeling. It gets dissolved into this space. This free and warm and loving space. You might help yourself by breathing, doing a breathing exercise. When you breathe in, you imagine that you breathe in the consciousness or God or nature or the higher power. You're breathing that into the sensation in your body that you have pinpointed. And then when you breathe out, you imagine that that sensation dissolves in the ocean of awareness. I want you to bear in mind that this technique will not bring you freedom from suffering, because the very sense of separation, the very sense of being a separate self, and also believing that you are just that you are limited by your body, is the exact reason for you suffering. It's something that brings you suffering, right? So this technique, I'd say, belongs more to the field of psychology rather than consciousness studies. But even if you haven't had your enlightenment experience, you can still try and do that. Even enlightenment, by the way, means the realization of your true nature, realizing who you are. Who am I? Who I am. When you recognize that on a feeling level, on a visceral level, that's enlightenment. If you're starting out with triggering emotions and annoyance and irritations and irritability, that's a good place to start, to look at your projection and to see how projection brings suffering to your life. And doing that technique will allow you to reduce the intensity of that suffering. Here within this stream of work, namely Engtelligent, I'm planning to start an online study group very soon, where we're going to practice our English, we're going to pile our way towards fluency, and we're also going to do that by the means of spoken and written self-development techniques, including a great deal of non-duality techniques. So if you're interested in that, please email me. Just probably titling your email something like English group. Okay? If you're interested, so please let me know so that I know how many people to expect. And you can find my email address if you expand the description box down below. I'm wishing you the very best, and I'm hoping to see you very soon on this channel. So don't forget to give this video a like so that YouTube can share it with more and more people who are suffering, so that we can help the world awaken. And I'll be looking forward to hearing from you very soon. Please leave your comments telling me what your main projections would have to be, and I will talk to you very soon. Thank you.